And I would like now to leave the floor to Mr. Francesco Biella of IRI, who will talk about cheese consumption worldwide. It is a little bit late, so please, I would like to ask all the speakers to keep to their times. Let me give you a fresh piece of news. Since I'm a journalist, let me tell you that Italy has exceeded France in cheeses of designating origin production, DOP. Michel Laney will give us his commentary after, if he likes. Wonderful, thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. I would like now to open a window on the world of consumption. What do we mean by consumption? We mean all what ends up with the final consumer. So I'm talking about grocery distribution and cheese. And I represent IRI. Many of you probably already know IRI. So I am giving you data coming from scanners, which is the core business of IRI. We do scanning and evaluations based on scanners data, which are extremely precise data, since this world actually works according to strictly scientific rules. So we shall talk about cheese consumption, and we shall try to understand trends in terms of grocery consumption in general, because this is the context we are working in. And we have to say something about the retailing industry this year, something positive compared to the previous years. We shall also talk about different types of cheese. The cheese market is an extremely important one. We shall have a look at the Italian situation, and we shall take a snapshot about other countries in the world. And then, of course, we shall zero in on Italian cheese. So let's start with the macroeconomic scenario in Italy. The first indicator I am talking about is the GDP. We can see that in the first quarter, GDP has gone up by 0.3% in Italy. This is a pretty interesting data. This is the trend, which means that it's up compared to the previous quarter. But if you compare it with the first quarter in 2014, the situation is stable. But given our situation in the last 3 years, we cannot but be happy with this result. As far as consumption trends are concerned, we can see that consumptions are growing. We're talking about consumption in general here, including cars, consumer electronics, and so on and so forth. And this plus 0.5 is driven by exports. But once again, if you compare this to the previous years, this is positive. Finally, we have a plus sign. Even though IRI is not talking about recovery yet, we are just taking stock of the fact that something is moving and changing in the first months of 2015. Another important point I would like to dwell on is that at the beginning of 2015, we have a deflation situation. This is very important also in terms of the retailing industry and its dynamics. The big burden is unemployment, with a 13% unemployment in March 2015. So we are looking forward to seeing the results of the political measures that have been enacted in the last few months. Statistics, however, can be interpreted in a certain way. So you also have to see what is meant by employment. Anyway, we expect that the employment will improve, because this 13% unemployment still is a record figure for Italy, a negative record figure. Let's make one step backwards and let's see the situation at the end of 2015. in order to compare the Italian GDP with the GDP of the euro area. This histogram does not need any comment, since Italy is the only country of the ones featuring in this histogram with a negative GDP. However, this is nothing new. We listen to this every day in the news, on TV. We read this in the press. So we are the only one in red. Interesting to look at Spain and Greece, with a growing GDP at the end of 2014. Talking about organized retail mass market in Europe, you can see the value, the annual value, and we can see the progressive figures from January to April. It is important to include April because in April consumption is affected by the Easter festivities. So we have a plus 1.8 in terms of turnover in the first quarter 2014. And what shall we say about this? I mean, it is true that this is a technical bounce because we're comparing these data with data that had been negative for 3 years. So before being too optimistic, you have to be careful. But at least we know that we are not losing business, because the minus 0.7 in 2014 means 400-500 million euros that have disappeared from the mass market turnover. So we're talking about significant figures. Volumes and values show a similar growth. This is due to the fact that prices are stable. Prices are not increasing. They have not increased for 2 years. As far as promotional pressure is concerned, this is another interesting parameter. Up to 2014, we could see a growing promotional pressure with volumes characterized by a minus sign. This meant that all the money invested in promotional activities had a decreasing yield. Conversely, in the first 4 months of 2015, we can see that promotional pressure goes up by 0.1%. This means that in January, April 2014, we had 28.5% of the business that was sold as a promotion in terms of value. So this is a positive data, because this growth by 1.8% has been achieved without any extra spending in promotional activities. And this is the monthly graph that shows in detail what is happening in the first 4 months of the year, highlighting the fact that these figures are sound. The growth is well distributed throughout the 4 months. March and April have been put together to neutralize the effect of the Easter festivities. We can see that in January last year we had pretty brilliant results. This gives even more value to a positive January month this year. In other words, in 2015 we are realizing that things are slightly improving as far as consumption is concerned. Within the cauldron of the Italian mass market, if we want to divide consumption into 4 macro categories, we can see that groceries are characterized by the biggest growth. However, beverages and personal care products show a negative trend that has been amended. For personal care, we have had negative figures for 5 years, so this is an interesting data. Beverages depend on temperatures and climate, so they can grow or lose ground depending on the temperature. And products for home care is a sector that has been problematic for many, many years. Let's now focus on cheese. Cheese in Italy. Why is the cheese market so important in Italy? Well, because of the figures that we can see here, 6.1 billion euro. This is a huge amount of money. If you go and see the packaged mass market, and by packaged I mean that you exclude all fresh cheeses that are sold freshly cut, you can see that cheese nevertheless is the second most important mass market category after cereals. But if you include also the cheese that is sold over the counter, you can see that cheese is the #1 category in terms of mass market. So we're talking about a significant percentage of the mass market. Milk consumption is less than half if you add UHT milk and fresh milk and put them together. However, we have negative figures for the second year on the row. We're talking about years ending in April 2015 to have the most updated scenario. And these negative figures were present last year as well. How can we explain this? Well, it is a macro trend in mass markets that are weak in general. The price of cheese, on top of that, has gone up significantly. So these results show that the market's pretty stable. Volumes are going down a little bit. The price increase has eroded 0.5% growth, which we find in the value sellout. So it is a market that in the past few years was a cash market. So in the last few years, actors in this sector have been puzzled and baffled by these data. In other words, cheese has reached a stability point and is slightly regressing. This is a snapshot about some countries in the world. The first thing I would like to stress is that France, Italy and Germany have a similar market size. Italy, however, has a smaller population. Of course, there are many other factors that must be taken into due consideration, such as the percentage of consumers and non-consumers, the development of mass market and the retailing industry in the different countries. However, Italy has a significant consumption of cheese. You find trends which are slightly different from what I showed you before, because in order to align the trends of these countries, we focused on the solar year 2014. It was necessary to be able to compare the data in the different countries. And in this table, you can immediately see that there is a significant increase in average prices all over the world. Take Germany, with a volume growth by 1.5% and a 6.5% growth in value due to price increase, also due to a change in the product mix, but this is predominantly accounted for by an increase in prices. The same has happened in other countries, such as Spain, or have a look at the United States, a huge market, because it's a very big country, 14 billion euro, plus 7% in terms of value and only plus 1.2% in terms of volumes. Japan is another interesting country with about 1 billion euro in terms of the market and a plus 7% in terms of turnover. Australia, with a loss in volume and an increase in value. All values are expressed in euros and have been converted according to the most recent exchange rate. rates, taking the average of last week. Back to Italy, let's now zero in on the Italian market. A market which is split in two areas. For our purpose, this distinction between packaged cheese and cheese sold over the counter is a significant difference. Over-the-counter products amount for approximately 40% of the market. We have a negative figure for volumes. This means that in the past, there had been a change from imposed weight to variable weight, whereas this seems to have come to an end right now. Here you can see how significant a cheese sold at variable weight is important in the different countries we have explored before. In the UK, they only use pre-packed cheese. Conversely, in Greece, everything is sold over the counter, freshly cut and over the counter. Italy is in a middle position. As far as prices are concerned, we can see that there has been an increase, albeit a mild increase, in both sectors. However, notwithstanding the price increase, promotional pressure has increased as well. This means that prices have gone up more than what we can read here. Then, of course, the consumer is attracted and volumes are boosted with promotional activities, so that the average price in the end seems to be slightly higher, but not as high as it actually is. So this indicates that there is a certain tension on prices on the market. And if we split the market in its four main compartments, we can see that hard cheese is showing a growth, plus 2.8%. All the other types of cheese show a downward trend, and in the field of hard cheese, the price has gone down. It's the only type of cheese for which price has gone down. And this shows how reactive consumers are towards prices. Price plays a very important role, especially since consumers pay a lot of attention to price. They use promotional leaflets as a shopping list. They compare different supermarkets. Consumers today simultaneously go to 3 or 4 different supermarkets hunting for promotions. So price is a significant element. Both Grana Padano and Parmigiano Reggiano, talking about hard cheese, have developed pretty aggressive promotional activities. Specifically, Parmigiano Reggiano has been very active in the last few months. Let's now have a look at the micro categories, where we still find our plus 2.8 for hard cheese. Stretched cheese show a growth. Market niches, specifically feta and tofu, maybe because they're viewed as health cheese, and this is a predominant theme in mass markets. They have gone up, feta and tofu, but all the other types of cheese are going down. So we can say that cheese is actually supported by the promotional activities of hard cheese. Otherwise, we would have read even worse figures than what we can see here. So right now, the situation shows that the recovery is difficult. So figures have been slightly negative for a couple of years, and this is a signal, and it looks as if at the beginning of 2015, characterized by the growth in mass markets, well, it looks as if this growth has nothing to do with cheese, still showing a -5, -1 trend. That is all for me. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Francesco Biella. I have a very quick question. Are there any educational programs in China or India to drive the consumption of cheese? Well, to be honest, I don't know whether there are programs as such. For sure, there is a cultural issue that needs to be sorted out. What I mean to say is that those countries still do not know certain products. Nowadays, with the growth in those countries, with more culture, with more wealth, people are leaving behind their traditions to enter new areas. They have some lactose problems there. As far as programs, educational programs are concerned, I don't think there are any, but we don't know for sure. But as you can see at the expo, there are many Italian producers who are focusing on China. We have seen many packages at Tutto Food, a food exhibition, with Chinese labels written in Chinese. Of course, there is still a lot to do in those countries, and that's why everybody focuses on these countries, which have a huge potential market. Thank you very much. So, thinking about large exporters such Mr. Zanetti here, which trends can you see for China or for other countries as far as cheese is concerned? Well, China is still lagging behind as far as cheese and typical cheese consumption is concerned. The dairy trend is upwards, but our cheese still is having some difficulties. Conversely, as far as Japan is concerned, we have started back in 1982 and we have reached a very satisfactory level. But we're still behind as far as China is concerned. What about India? Well, we are present in India and predominantly it is food service. The mass market is moving very slowly. The problem is that it is prohibited to export cheese with animal curd to India. And, of course, the Parmigiano Reggiano cheese is made with calf curd, so we cannot export it to India. I have a question for Mr. Ambrosi, the president of Assolati. I'm talking to you as an entrepreneur. I know that you have a joint venture with EMI in Switzerland. So my first question is, why didn't you find any allies in Italy? And do you believe that aggregation in Italy could give us more strength in terms of export? Undoubtedly, the international critical mass plays an important role, or critical mass plays an important role internationally, because you have to compete against large producers, so critical mass can be of advantage. Then, of course, you have to understand the type of aggregation which is needed for a specific type of product. Of course, it is an issue of complementary products, but this is for sure the way to go. Well, I know that there is a roundtable discussion in the afternoon, so we shall listen to Mr. Pugliese later on. But we've seen that promotion in 2015 had a pressure of 28.5% in value. In the afternoon, you will explain to us whether this is true and which are current strategies. But I can see here Mr. Riccardo Deserti, director of the Parmigiano Reggiano Consortium. We have heard about hard cheese, of controlled designation of origin, and can you please expand on your strategy? 2015 has been a very particular year because, talking about our product, there has been a production increase with an excessive supply, which has conversely brought the price down, but the lower price has actually spurred our promotional activities. So Mr. Biella could not talk about this in detail, but if you compare this to the trends in average prices in our category, we can see that Parmigiano Reggiano has had an average reduction in the consumer price. So this was not a strategy in 2015, it was a commercial need. Looking at the future, it is our objective to achieve a stabilization of supply, and consumers are pretty flexible and they look at the price, as we have seen, but of course that's not a parameter that can safeguard stable quotations. I have a question. We can see that hard cheeses are doing better than other types of cheese, but as we've heard from Mr. Rossi, amongst hard cheeses, the cheeses with controlled designation of origin are the ones that are mostly represented. Well, sure, I didn't have enough time to specify the situation of hard cheese. However, I would like to make a comment on prices. The fact that Parmigiano Reggiano, that has a certain price position, which is 25–30% more expensive than Grano Padano, has actually decreased its average price, well, this situation has reduced the gap in price between these two types of cheese. There were moments in the year when the difference was minimal. And this is not an unspeakable situation, because it is much better to keep the two price positions, the two different identities and two different perceived values by consumers in terms of price and product quality. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because consumers quickly get used at buying something at a low price. And we see this very frequently. After a few months of low price, as soon as the price goes back to its baseline price, consumption collapses. In other words, of course, if there is excess supply, prices go down. The retailing industry and the mass market offers promotional prices, and this is the unavoidable consequence. But you also have to think about consumers' perception. Parmigiano Reggiano is viewed by consumers as the premium cheese amongst hard cheeses. So you have to be careful with your promotional activities to avoid value destruction. I believe that this is very important. Have you got any more data about volumes? I'm sorry, I haven't got them here, but I can let you know. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions? I thought Mr. Pugliese wanted to have the microphone. Is that right? Or am I wrong? No, I'm not wrong. Do consumers really need that prices go down, or is it the market that, due to the fact that there was the embargo, the Russian embargo, and the cheese remained in Italy, so this actually caused significant pressures on the priced milk at the farmer's gate, and we had huge quantities that remained in Italy. You're right. You need to control these events, because if you use promotion too much, it becomes really hard to bring prices up again. It is very true. We've seen this. We were talking about that 28.5% of value which is sold as promotion. I mean, for 3 or 4 years we have had a growing promotional pressure, but volumes have gone down. This means that this is the other side of the coin. Consumers get used to finding excellent products at a promotion price, and to bring consumption back to the true price, well, this is much more difficult because volumes simply collapse. These are known dynamics. Mr. Leonardo Vigora, do you agree on that? Well, Gorgonzola cheese has had a more stable market in 2015, and at the beginning of 2015 our quotations have been very stable. We have also increased our promotional pressure to sustain consumption given the general trend, especially in the second half of 2014, showing a slowdown compared to what we were used to. That is why we promoted our product, also because we had more resources available. But I mean, we're talking about small percentages. Sometimes we tend to stress the fact that consumption is down, but, you know, okay, maybe consumers waste less, are more careful to what they buy. So maybe this is not a real decrease in consumption, but rather is more awareness from the consumer who goes to the supermarket more frequently, buys less each time and wastes less. I believe everybody has done some spending review concerning their shopping habits. Sure, this is all true. Cutting down on waste is the #1 motivation that has emerged from a survey amongst consumers. So we confirm the trend already mentioned. And this, of course, reduces the absorption of the product on the market. However, we recognize this trend amongst consumers. We believe that confidence is very important. If there is no confidence, if you have no money, you don't spend any money. If you have money, you don't spend because you are anxious about the future. So there are many different motivations, but cheese is doing -1, and that's a fact. Consumption is going down. You know, it is ethically correct for consumption to go down, and that's good news. But you have to think about the business, and business has contracted. And once consumers change their habits, most likely they will go on this way. So if they decrease their waste in the future, they will either further reduce waste or at least remain at the same level, because waste today still makes up for a considerable share of the business. So should we hope that people go on wasting? It is not nice to say this, but in terms of markets, waste plays an important role.